Welcome back, gamers, to part 3 of the Lich Hunter build series featuring the very beautiful and sexy Protea. Yes, despite all the calls and comments for frames like Korra, Valkyr and such, here comes Marshmallow with the Lich Hunter build video for Miss Squidface. Sometimes I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Longtime followers of this channel will know that, and also you cannot expect day one content from lazy old Marshmallow these days. Getting things fluffy for showtime takes, well, time. And yes, that back there was the actual build. If you're interested in watching the rest of the video, timestamps are in the description. Now, before we move on to discussing the build in depth, I thought it appropriate to preface with my personal take on Protea. According to what I've read and heard throughout Discord and the forums, she's a fun frame to play, and I can kinda see that. She's self-sufficient, she does a bit of support, and a lot of DPS if played right. All qualities that Marshmallow looks for in his imaginary partners. With that said though, I've never been that hyped for Protea. I just cannot see an immediate use case for her. Sure, she knows how to play with balls very well, giggity. But what's the point when most of your time in Warframe is spent running capture missions and waiting for finisher animations? Personally, I play Protea run her first two abilities, occasionally using dispensary for energy and or health, but both of those things are covered by stuff like Zeneric and Arcanes anyways. Remember, I play solo most of the time, even though I'm part of a server filled with hungry boys waiting to shower me with their attention. At least my narcissistic ass thinks so. My overall thoughts on Protea may change in the future, but for this build video, most of the mod choices were done with considerations for her shield satellites. The other abilities, not so much. So what do you think of Protea? Is she your new queen or waifu or whatever the kids are calling their hallucinations these days? For me, aesthetics wise, especially with the Mav helmet, she is beautiful. Hers a little spiky for me, but everything else is nice, especially the proportions. Of course, you fucking perv. With the default squid headgear though, I don't think you could even rule 34 that thing. If there's a rule 34 of that, I don't want to see it. Alright, time for the build. This entire setup here is tuned for duration and strength. You can substitute energy conversion with a blind rage if you're okay with a slightly worse efficiency. I mean, Protea isn't exactly an energy hungry frame anyways. You might look at vitality and be like, no. Protea is obviously a frame that prioritizes shields over health for survivability, right? Well, yes and no. You'll actually end up with higher EHP by going with vitality over shield mods like redirection, especially with Arcane Ultimatum. I've done the math, but I may still be wrong, which, you know, in that case, please do let me know down in the comments, and please support your arguments with numbers. Not to mention the shield gain and regen you get from her 1 is more than enough for even rank 5 Lich territory missions. Cunning Drift isn't really crucial to the build. You can replace it with pretty much anything you'd like. I treat the Exiles mods as a sort of fine-tuning for the core build. And finally, Primed Sure-Footed is of course a very personal thing. If you don't mind being thrown around and getting fricked in the ass, then please use something else, like Adaptation. It's probably a better choice. For weapons, I've decided to put my own suggestions from the previous video to the test. Yes, Arcane Trickery plus Bronco Prime with a build centered around that Dizzying Rounds mod. And a pretty decent melee. You can use whatever shtick you'd like. I've just been growing fonder of the Pt.3 Prime lately, so that's what I've been using throughout testing. And this sort of a setup is completely adequate for even high level missions. In fact, I did not equip any sort of a primary. I just didn't feel like it was necessary. With that said though, if you're going into a disruption mission with the Grineers starting at level 100, then you may want a strong primary. For most other mission types, you'll be fine. Now to wrap up the build, let's get into the focus schools and operator arcanes. Zeneric is such an obvious choice in my opinion, and not because of energizing dash even, though it does help. It's mainly got to do with void singularity. Think of Protea's blaze artillery and how it gets stronger with each enemy hit. It's favorable to have a chunk of enemies closely grouped together to maximize the DPS output, and Void Singularity does exactly that. It pulls in enemies and with the help of Magus lockdown, keeps them in place long enough for you to summon your floaty guns. It really does work in practice, and I'll have a clip playing here to show you how relatively easy it is to line everything up in actual gameplay. In my opinion, Protea is a little more laid back for Lich hunting compared to Harrow. They both rely on shields, but with Protea you can afford to make a few more mistakes, cause that shield regen is nuts. You're going to be relying on your melee full time while using the Bronco to perform consistent finishers. You won't really encounter much problems or difficulty up till when the Grineers start spawning at level 100. At that point, you're going to be relying on both arcanes to keep you safe. But that doesn't mean you're going to struggle though. No, as long as you keep an eye on your shields, Protea's shield generators will be more than enough. In fact, she can even take a rank 5 Lich like a champ, because the shield just regenerates so fast in between the finisher animations. And while Blaze Artillery is great for taking out chunks of enemies, it barely does much against a rank 5 Lich. You could use it to charge the implosion for Temporal Anchor, but it's still gonna be less damage output than bashing the Fricker with your melee multiple times. The Temporal Anchor is still useful for diving headfirst into dangerous situations with minimal risk or repercussions though, so use that to your advantage. I'm pretty confident with this Lich Hunter build for Protea, but still kinda feel like I'm not squeezing the max potential out of her like I did with Harrow. I don't know, I'm sure you boys are a lot smarter than me, so please leave comments on how you think the build could be improved, or perhaps there are other synergies here that I'm just not seeing. One thing's for sure though, with the build and setup I suggested for Protea here, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a better time hunting Liches than AGGP is having trying to deal with the big hate from the Warframe community right now.